Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Racing. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my pulchritudinous co-host, Chris Racing. That one, I was not sure that one was going to roll off the tongue today. Today, we are celebrating a bit of a milestone. This is our 50th episode of the Clear the Shelf podcast, a little seed that was planted by Chris about 2 years ago. And we wanted to take a moment and thank you for kind of coming along this journey with us. We've covered what we think are some really interesting topics. Some of those topics seem to have fallen flat with you guys, but nonetheless, we got to sit around and talk about them, and that was something that has brought immense joy to myself. We've had about a total of 161,000 views across these, across the past 48 episodes. We actually haven't even put in the last 2 episodes there. And we've had some incredible guests, especially lately. We've pulled in some very big sellers, some sellers doing big numbers, some sellers who run their businesses incredibly smart. And we've also, if nothing else, we've reinforced the power of the 80-20 rule in our own lives. Because as we go back through the episodes, we can see that 20% of our episodes have pushed about 80% of the total views. And it just goes to show how that rule, that Pareto principle, is really found everywhere. Whether you're making content, whether you're running an Amazon business, or whether you're running a sweaty startup. That 80-20 rule is going to be everywhere. So wanted to take a moment and thank you for being a friend or a fan or whatever it is you might want to call yourself. It means a ton to us, and we really appreciate it. So, and Chris, it's been good to have you as a co-host. It's been fun to get to know you better. It's been fun to learn from you. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you pushing to make this happen.
It's been quite a journey. And it's been fun the whole time. Like, I'm having as much, if not more fun now than I was in the beginning. So it's right. There's no reason not to continue on for 50 more and 50 more and just see how long we can keep this running.
Absolutely. It's, something that is, I don't know, something that's come out of this is, not only a friendship and someone to kick ideas around with, and something that really everyone needs to get in their own business and in their lives, but I was thinking about this last night because I sent you a question last night in our chat. And I think to most people, if I had sent that question to a normie, they would have been like, what the hell does this even mean? This makes no sense whatsoever, because I was drawing a parallel essentially between a movie, which was made from a book. Okay. It's just for those of you out there who think we watch movies. No, we read books here. But essentially drawing a parallel between a movie and a book that's about sports to an Amazon business and kind of what the crossover was. And that's not something that you get in many other friendships, relationships, and you can find your own if you're willing to kind of put yourself out there. But we'll get to that when we talk a little bit about networking here in a little bit. Now, for today's episode, we're going to be talking about what it takes to grow an Amazon arbitrage business to 7 figures. Now, and we're going to break this down in stages. We're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to get from 0 to 10K, what it takes to get to 10 to 50K, and then what it takes to go from 50 to 100K. And these are monthly numbers here, all right? Now, before we do this, I really want to preface this particular episode by saying that revenue numbers, they're largely bullshit, and that's a little on the nose. It's a little in your face, but really revenue is largely a vanity metric. You can make $1 million a year and you can be broke, or you can even be at a loss. I was rather surprised the other day when Lucid, the electric vehicle company, they released their latest numbers, and they announced a $30 million loss on about $170 million in revenue. So it doesn't matter what scale you get to, you can be at a loss. If we go to the Amazon side, you can look at the pharma packs. You can look right now. The aggregators of the world are not doing well. So what matters most at the end of the day is your profit. It's what gets reinvested for growth. It's what gets pulled out to pay yourself, to pay your team. But it's not what gets you eyeballs on social media, which, of course, is exactly why we chose a seven-figure number to discuss on this episode, because we know what the algorithm wants. But we're going to try to break some frames. We're going to try to offer some tips to help you grow. But before we dive in, you guys know the drill. It takes us several minutes to prepare for this show. So if you find some value in this episode, do us a solid. Take a screenshot. Share this on social media. Pop a link somewhere. Tag Chris and I so we can thank you personally. It means a ton to us. It gets us in front of a few more eyeballs, and it makes us want to come back and do more of this for you people, and have a little fun along the way. So, all right, let's dive down into some numbers here. Now, as we go through this exercise, we're gonna lay out some numbers. Public math is something that typically we tell people we don't do. So today we're going to be using some assumptions. These assumptions are going to be a $20% profit margin. And I want to preface that by saying a study by NYU that I recently read states that the average profit margin of businesses in the US is just a hair above 7%. I was actually surprised by that number. I thought it would be higher.
Yeah.
I really did. But we know that Walmart and Target, they run sub 4% profit margins. If I'm not mistaken, Walmart is just a hair above 2, and Target is running at like 3.75 or something like that. That's their profit margin. So when we run these numbers, we're assuming a very healthy profit margin number based on sourcing high quality products. And I don't think there are a lot of businesses where you can actually have a 20% profit margin. It can be done in an Amazon business if you are sourcing really, really well. All right. We're also going to be assuming that 35% of your sales will get eaten up directly by Amazon fees. You got to pay to play. You got to pay to get the eyeballs on your products. And that's what Amazon's take is about 35%. Now, if you go and search, well, how much does it cost to sell on Amazon? You're going to see a lot of articles and things like that say, oh, well, it's 55%. But what that's taking into account is things like PPC costs. It's taking into account you running specials or coupons or sales or all these kind of things, Vine reviews, all these things that private label sellers will do to their products that those of us in the arbitrage space do not have to do. But I want to tell you guys that these numbers are going to be rough. So don't come at us in the comments flaming us because of a rounding error. Go touch some grass instead. Okay, these are gonna get you in the ballpark. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about going from 0 to 10K. And it's been a while for me. But I remember those days. It was a lot. And in my opinion, it might actually be the hardest part of being an Amazon seller. Going from 0 to 10K, you're starting from nothing. You don't know how to walk, and you got to figure that all out. So I want to touch a little bit on learning first. I think you and I are both big proponents of learning. And I sort of think that learning should be one of the main things that you're doing as a newer seller. and there's just so much that comes at you. Like, if you go on social media to look for people to follow, people who are educating, there are dozens of people out there, and you have to figure out, well, what's the good information and what's the bad information, which is a job in itself. You need to learn how to source. You need to learn what tools you might need. You need to learn how to network if you've ever done it before. You got to learn how to prep, how to ship to Amazon. What kind of corporate structure do you need? How are you going to track your profit and your loss? It's a lot. So I guess how do you filter the signal through the noise? Like, I mean, is there a magic bullet other than consuming a ton?
Well, there's a little bit of pushback uh, that I want to give. Well, in general, there's pushback because you kind of have two different camps, and I think it's probably starts based on age, and kind of what you have on the line when you enter this space, um, because you'll have people like me, people like you, like we value study and we want to consume as much information about a topic as possible. Like I want to know everything, ins and outs, even hypotheticals, about whatever topic if it's caught my attention. Um, yeah, but then you won't have to go too far before you run into people that say, you know, you're just reading another book as a form of procrastination. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to, you really have to know what kind of what what your personality type is, and you kind of have to counteract your weaknesses, because there are weaknesses on both sides, whether you're a type A or a type B. Um, so you got to kind of balance that and kind of focus on the ultimate goal, and just um, put safeguards in place to make sure you don't get off track,
Mm-hmm.
and because and that's something I'm prone to. I'll just keep reading about stuff and I know I'm putting it off. So, but at the same time, I am craving the knowledge legitimately. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. Um, but yeah, you really do. I think basically you're depending on which type you are. One important part is to find your tribe. You need to, and you need to sample. I mean, unless you get it right away, and you feel comfortable. But there's a lot of conflicting advice out there from
Mm-hmm.
people positioning themselves as experts, as teachers, as educators in the space. Um, so you need to kind of jump into a few different groups. Don't just go, put the blinders on and go down the rabbit hole of the first group that you find. Because you're gonna find different philosophies and different best practices and different toolkits.
Mm-hmm.
From each section that you go in, but and see if it's a fit for your personality, because there's plenty of groups that's like, no, let's go, pedal to the metal right away. um, some people may respond to that and some people may do well with that kind of strategy. Other people are, kind of they'll give you as much education as you want, and there's value in that in my mind, not only because that's where I fall in personality wise. But I've always said there's any endeavor that you take on, there's going to be a set of mistakes that you have to make and you have to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So if I, in my opinion, a better understanding of the lay of the land is going to eliminate mistakes. If you can figure out where the pitfalls are beforehand and avoid them there, you're basically getting the advantage of the lesson learned in overcoming it without having to fall victim of it, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely. And I'll tell you something else. I think in when it comes to learning, um, it can often be. I don't want to call it a crutch because I think it's necessary. I mean, you and I are on the same page. Learning is something that is important. Yes, some people do treat it like a procrastination method, um, but I also think that it's a form of reaching out to try to get permission. This is something I've noticed for a long time. I mean, I'm in a unique situation because I've got the OA challenge. My inbox is full of people asking questions every day, and what I've noticed a lot is not everyone has either a support system or maybe even a cheerleading section, if you will. To say, yeah, I believe you can figure this out. I believe you can do this. Now go give it a shot. And I sort of think people use learning to maybe try to find either the person or the tribe who's going to do that for you when your family, your friends, the quote unquote normies are not doing that for you in your life. And I'll use a little personal example. I'm very, very fortunate in that my wife happens to think that I walk on water. Now, let's talk realistically for a moment. She knows that I'm an idiot, you know, uh, and but when it comes to figuring out, is there gonna are the bills gonna get paid, or is there gonna be food on the table? Is there gonna be a roof over our head? She thinks that I will figure it out, and she will cheer me on, and give me that permission to take the risk, take the next step, invest in that course that I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend that kind of money. Um, I don't think a lot of people have that. I think probably most people, like, because there are other people in my life who are like, I'll give you an example. When I was going to quit my job, the person I had to tell said, I'll see you back here in 6 months. And that was, I mean, that was a dagger. It's like, oh wow, I
Mhm.
don't know if I can do this, and it's nice to see that you don't think I can do this either. Fortunately, my wife had a different mindset, and I think a lot of people are looking for that validation, from people on the internet because they're not getting it anywhere else. So, and that's not a bad thing. That's just human nature. We need that. Um, but you also need to give yourself permission. Don't use learning and training and I need to know this next thing to keep yourself from taking action. One of the other things that I notice is, especially with newer sellers, they want everything to be black and white. If this happens, I respond this way, and if it's this, then I get X. But in life and in business, that's not how it works. We're in this constant state of gray area. And so, how do you make sure that you can take in information but not get to the point where you're like, you know what? Uh, I don't have this checklist, this perfect checklist. So how do I take the next step?
Right. Um, let's be honest. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. Self-employment isn't for everyone. I think there's again something to be said about what brought you here. What brought you into this space. If it's desperation, the cards are probably stacked against you. Because
Hmm.
you're looking for a Hail Mary. Um, and there's nothing wrong with it, but certain people are just born to be employees. They need everything laid out, and they want to punch in and they want to punch out at the end of the day, and they want a foolproof, a step-by-step plan on what their workday needs to include. um, and they don't really have much say in building that step-by-step instruction sheet, and they're fine with that.
Hmm.
And that's, again, it's okay. I'm not passing judgment on anybody like that. You know there's generations and millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people that just assume that that's the way it is. You go,
Hmm.
you punch in, you punch out for 40, 50 years, and then you retire and catch an STD in one of the Florida retirement communities. Uh, and totally kidding. Um, but that's it's the coolest thing about this industry, and the explosion that we've seen in the mentions and the topics of Amazon FBA. It's riding this wave of people kind of realizing that it doesn't have to be the old fashioned formula.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been a better time, a better period to be successful than right now. It's there's money, there's wealth, there's independence at our fingertips, just keystrokes away, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And people are kind of awakening to that, and this is one of the vehicles uh, that kind of fall into that new mindset. So,
Yeah.
but we've talked about it in numerous episodes. You have to be honest with yourself. Um, it's you need to identify your weaknesses, and then put a plan in place to succeed in spite of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you make a really good point. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and that's okay. Uh, and I think one of the other cool things about like the Amazon opportunity is you can take a small calculated bet and figure out whether or not that's for you. I'm Here's an example. I could take $1,000 and say, you know what, I'm gonna take 3 weeks. I'm gonna learn everything I can about Amazon. I'm gonna bet $1,000. I know to some people that seems like a lot. To others, that's like, that's a drop in the bucket. Everyone's in a different place. Uh, but I could source maybe 10 or 20 different products, send it all to Amazon, and see how it plays out. Am I profitable? Am I not profitable? Do I like the process? Can I figure out how to make this work at $1,000? And if I can, then I could start scaling up. Worst case scenario, I lose $1,000. There's another opportunity that I've been interested in and that I've looked at, which is a franchise. It's a dog washing franchise where it's all self serve. And you just go in, you wash your dog, and you go out, and it automatically locks behind you. Very hands off, very passive. But the minimum to get in is 40 grand. I have no idea if it will work or not. I like to think it will because everyone loves their dogs. Everyone wants a clean dog. If you put it in an area with high traffic, it's probably going to work out. But to take that bet, it's 40 large. And that's insane. If you have the cash, great. Maybe you lose that cash if it goes belly up. Or worst case scenario, you've gone and taken out a loan, and now you've got to pay that loan off over the next 10 years for something that is now essentially in the garbage can. And so, if you get nothing else out of this first portion of the episode, is give yourself permission, or take our permission to take a small bet on yourself to see if this will work for you. Of course, the next thing you need to do to go from 0 to 10K is you've got to source. I mean, if you are only learning and never getting to the sourcing part, of course, you're never going to know whether or not this works. And in my opinion, to go from 0 to 10K sourcing in all stages, in my opinion, really should be the main focus. That is how we make money. We make money by having inventory. But in the beginning, the biggest thing is you're going to have to embrace the suck, because it is not going to be the most fun thing to do. You're going to come across hurdles and roadblocks, whether it's gating, whether it's scanning 100 items and not coming up with a profitable item, or whatever it is. But you've got to get those reps in. And one of the things and I can't remember who I saw say this first, but if you're incredibly uncomfortable with pulling the trigger or putting in a credit card number to actually buy the product, you could actually paper trade. And when I was in, I think when I was in high school, I know that my senior in high school just did this little exercise, but they paper traded stocks for a month, and they figured out their buy price, and then a month later they figured out what the sell price would be, and then they tried to learn from that. Now, I don't think my senior actually learned anything, other than he's not good at picking stocks. But if you pay really close attention and do this with an Amazon product, you can do the same thing. You can say, well, here's my buy price on a particular item, and maybe it's $10. And I used, this cash back. I used this discount code. I used this discount gift card. I was able to find, a buy two, get one free sale. Um, and then 2 weeks later, the Amazon buy box price was X. And at that sell price, my profit would have been Y. And that will let you know if you're going in the right direction. Now, that could be a little bit of, well, that could be a little bit of procrastination just because you're not feeling comfortable and it feels good to try to find these wins. But I think it is still a move in the right direction. It's better than saying, well, I just don't know how to source, because now you can at least prove it to yourself in one way or another. Um, I don't know. What am I missing from the sourcing? I don't think sourcing is particularly hard, other than the fact in that you've got to put in a ton of reps. It's not You're not going to have like one shot, one kill almost ever.
Yeah, I think the thing with sourcing is no new seller is going to guess how it is correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It's you say you got to get the reps in, and even if you're a new seller tuning in, you hear that, but I guarantee you still don't get it. Like it's probably a lot more like baseball than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball, because it's the best hitters in baseball, get a hit 3 out of 10 times. They hit that's hitting 300. That's 350 will probably win you the batting title on most years. And the Baltimore Orioles brought up their number one prospect, and I believe he's the number one rated prospect in all of baseball, Jackson Holliday. He's the son of Matt Holliday, who was an outfielder a couple decades ago. Had huge biceps, like a guy had arms, just enormous guns, right? So his kid just rakes, right? He just flew through the minor leagues. Orioles finally called him up, and over, I think, maybe 10, 12 games, he had 2 hits in nearly 40 at bats. I mean, he hit like .08, like something like that when they finally sent him back down. So it's and he is projected to be a superstar,
Mm-hmm.
right? And but yet no one's sounding the alarms. That's just kind of how it goes. You go to single A, double A, triple A. That's your minor league ladder, and then you finally make it to the pros. Yeah, and there's a couple, rookie ball and stuff like that too. But you kind of, but they walk you up through those steps in order to get yourself acclimated to the kind of pitching that you're going to see, and the kind of speed of the game. It increases at each level, and sourcing is a bit like that. You're going to have a really low batting average, and it's going to be lower than you would probably guess before you got
Mm-hmm.
started. There's a whole lot of duds, and you kind of, like, through your frustration as a new seller, you're going to start blaming it on the fact that you're gated in certain things, and certain people will kind of splinter off from that and decide they need to get ungated in everything just to simply increase uh, their batting average, essentially. And eh, that's, whether that's right or wrong, we don't need to discuss that. You do what's best for you. Some people can make it work. It's not what I want to do or what I think is necessary, but it does work for some people. So you'll probably find that a lot through this episode, that there's no black and white. There's no exact right, exact wrong. It's a matter of doubling down on what works for you. But
Yeah.
It's yeah. I mean, it's every nearly 100% of rookies have a very low batting average, and you need to acknowledge that and be okay with it. That doesn't signify failure or that this is a bad idea. It's just part of cutting your teeth.
Yeah, that's a really really good analogy, especially the going to the pros and then having to go back to the minors a little bit. Like it's okay to get on a hot streak, and then have to pull back just a little bit.
Yeah,
Because it happens. It will sourcing will ebb and flow. Uh, but the main thing is you got to keep getting back up to bat. You can't say, you know
right.
what, I need to sit in the dugout for a couple of games. You got to continue to get back up there.
Yeah,
Um,
and things will adjust. Like you'll have certain products that maybe you source from a Walmart or a Target versus some little hole in the wall or something in tactical arbitrage. Like I love that they sort it by popularity now. If you go way down the list at those unpopular stores, the ones that nobody's searching, and compare those two products, say hypothetically that they same exact buy cost and same exact sell price, those are going to have profitability lifespans that are different, because everybody's looking at Walmart and Target, and that's also a source for easy wins as a new seller, so that's going to be attractive, to get the batting average up, so it's almost like to continue just beat this baseball analogy, pitchers are going to adjust, and they're going to find out that the breaking pitch, on the outside of the strike zone, there's something breaking away from you. You can't catch up to it, and you can't not swing at it. So they're going to start throwing you even more. So and then you have to adjust. You have to learn to lay off that pitch, So it's there are adjustments that need to be made on both sides. You're going to see different. You're going to have something that tanks, and that's going to be frustrating as all get out. But then you're going to have, you may find a nice little replend uh, that only sells 10 times a month, but guess what, nobody else is on it. So, and if that's $5 profit per month, take your $50 every single month and just put it away and keep on moving. It's just those are the reps, and it's, as a new seller, you're going to underestimate the volume that it takes.
yeah. One of the other things I think we should touch on before we move on to the next thing is, I know that a lot of folks, especially newer sellers, are really looking to have a checklist. When it comes to sourcing, it needs to make $3 in profit. It needs to make a 30% ROI. And it needs to be under 50,000 in sales rank. I understand that is attractive, especially to someone who's new, because it gives me these black and white, parameters. It kind of gives me those guardrails in a bowling alley, to go and knock down some pins, and that's fine. But don't get too comfortable with that, because there are so many other things to take into account. I really like your $50 a month idea there. If I can do that, with a product that makes $2 in profit, and maybe it only makes me a 10% ROI, but I can sell 25 of them in a month, I'm going to do that. If there's another item that is maybe a 50% ROI, but I'm going to make $50 a month in profit on just selling just one, then maybe I do that as well. And neither one of those are wrong. One of them's probably going to be under that 50,000 in sales rank. The other one is probably going to be over 300,000 in sales rank. And there is no right or wrong answer on that one.
Yeah,
Now,
you know what? We both do a fair amount of, well, more than a fair amount, but we do a heavy volume of storefront stalking, right? So, and this is spoiler alert, not to spoil the end of this episode, but if you're a new seller and you saw the title of this and you're like, yeah, I want a blueprint on a 7-figure store. The spoiler is it probably doesn't look the way you think it looks. Like these $1 million store doesn't have some sweetheart deal with Sony to get PS5s for $100 and then flip them for 500.
Mm-hmm.
It is far less sexy than you may think, or the way you have it pictured in your head. It's grind. And if you scoff at that $2 profit per unit number that you just spit out, maybe you need to reframe things, because there's gonna be a lot of that stuff. You're gonna grind it out, and you're just again, let's just squeeze the life out of this baseball thing. You got to hit more singles. Like
Yeah,
don't be a home run hitter.
absolutely. Yeah, Buy Boxer, the guy behind Buy Boxer, his name is Scott. I always forget his last name, but Scott Needham. Scott Needham, he once released his like per unit profit on his, I think, top 10 or top 20 ASINs, and he was running an $80 million a year, if I recall correctly, wholesale account. I don't think that any of his top 10 or 20 ASINs, or what he shared, I don't think any of them were over $3 in profit per sale. But several of them were selling hundreds or even thousands of units per month. Um, and that's what it takes. It's what it takes at scale.
Yeah. We talk about the Walmart. The really cool thing, probably the number one thing that stuck out from the interview that we did with Perry and Kim,
Mm-hmm.
was the segment where Perry talked about having to tell Kim, "Hey, you're the CEO of a $10 million a year company." And he was trying to reframe things and kind of put it into perspective. And that's something that probably every Amazon seller needs to realize, because
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to think that, when we start talking about Walmart numbers, and like when you cover the profit margins, that Walmart is sub 3% profit margin. That applies to you more than you may realize. Like that's a retail company. You run a retail company, so, and think about what they sell. They're also probably selling a lot of the same things that you do. So you need to start framing yourself as the president or the founder or the CEO, whatever your favorite term is, of what is going to be, what you hope to be, is a large retail company. So those numbers, when we talk about Walmarts and Amazons and stuff and Targets, those apply to you more than you may realize, or probably more than you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, one of the we're gonna hound on this for quite some time if we're not careful. But uh, yeah,
Is
well,
that
we'll
was
move
that
on.
pun? Was that pun intended with the dog in the back?
Yeah, yeah, it
All right.
was. Yeah,
I
the
didn't
pool
miss
guy,
that.
the pool guy is here, and other than the UPS guy, the pool guy is just my dog's most hated enemy, unfortunately. Well, you guys may not be able to hear this in the recording because we'll pull it out. But uh, one of the other things I want to talk about is kind of your software stack. I see a ton of people, especially new people. You'll see, oh, what do I need when it comes to getting started on Amazon? Do I need? Well, of course, I need Keepa, and I also need some sort of profit calculator, whether that's RevSeller, whether it's SellerAmp, or one of the other multitudes of ones that are out there. What kind of, do I need a Dymo or a Rollo? Do I need thermal labels? What kind of printer do I need? That's when someone is green, because they're trying to figure out, well, what are all these things that I can buy to get started? But I guess, yeah, Tim Ferriss talks about the minimum effective dose, and I want to talk about the minimum effective dose of a software stack. To me, you've got to have Keepa. There's no choice. You need to have it. You need to learn it. You need to love it. Keepa is the backbone of an Amazon business, especially when you're in arbitrage. And it's going to run you $21 a month or something like that. Then I think you need some sort of profit calculator. I know that Amazon offers a profit calculator. I think it sucks. So you do, in my opinion, you need some sort of profit calculator. Probably going to cost you, yeah, when it comes to seller or when it comes to rev seller, it's going to be $77 a year for your first year because there's a $20 off codes that are out there. If you want Seller Amp, which comes with a mobile app, you're going to be running about $20 a month. So you'll get the mobile app for sourcing in stores. You'll get the software on the computer. You could go straight to Inventory Lab, which is going to be $60 a month. It's going to give you some inventory management. They do have a calculator. It's fine. It's not my favorite. It's not what I would use. Um, and then there are some other ones out there. I think Helium 10 might have one that's out there, and there are a few others. Outside of that, the only other thing I could argue is maybe you need a repricer from the first day that you have inventory go live, but only because repricers have gotten a lot cheaper over the years. You know, it used to be that a good repricer was going to cost you $100 a month, and now you can get it for $27 a month. Am I missing anything in the software stack that you really need to get started?
I don't think so. I mean, that's as lean, that's a pretty lean start, and anything else is extra, not, and not saying it's not effective. Um, I started with more, I was tactical arbitrage from the beginning. Um, but I know, especially with the enhancements with Seller Amp coming on the scene and then Rev Seller, the upgrades that they've made, you could build, especially we're still talking about the 0 to 10,000. I mean, you can get to that point manually sourcing using just those three pieces of software. Because I'm gonna include Inventory Lab, because that's one of the very last things I would ever cancel if I was in something catastrophic happened. So yeah, that's and there's enhancements from there, but that's that's pretty lean starting stack.
Perfect. All right, so this next thing that I kind of want to talk about, there's really two parts of it, but maybe it's under one umbrella, and this is the kind of the reinvesting. If you're going from 0 to 10K, in my opinion, I don't know if you have the bandwidth or the flexibility or anything else to be able to pay yourself. If let's just say, if you're selling $10,000 a month and you got a 20% margin, realistically, you should be at about $2,000 in profit. But if you want to grow that, there's not really a good way to pull out a dividend for yourself, to put yourself on payroll. And I think that all profit should go back into your business. Do you agree, or do you think that you should pay yourself a little something from day one, just to get a little taste, but not get high on your own supply?
I'm not opposed to a tiny little bit.
Hmm.
Like when I first started, I can trigger payouts,
Hmm.
basically daily if I want to. Um, but I just got in the habit of just doing it weekly. It's set up to automatically do it every 2 weeks on my account. But every Sunday night I trigger it. And that's just kind of the cycle of bill paying and money disbursement that I got used to. Um, and when I started, I would just take $25 a week, and the when I got a business bank account, it was, it's basically a click of a button to add a business savings account to it as well.
Hmm.
And I just kind of tossed it in there. And it's not even necessarily for me. I kind of, as it grows, I kind of had different visions for it, like, well, maybe if I decide to make a wholesale purchase, or, like if I need to chunk it, eventually I would have something. So there is something to be said about taking a little bit just as proof of profitability, you know, um, as long as there actually is profit
Hmm.
to provide proof. But other than that, everything should be put back in, because if you think about it, if you're running, let's take the high end, the $10,000. If you're selling $10,000 a month and you're running the 20% profit margin, for easy math, if anything else, you have $2,000 worth of profit. Uh, let's remember that the numbers aren't going to be as clean as we're making them sound.
Hmm.
That's worth stating again. We said that in the beginning, but it's worth stating again. But that $2,000 worth of profit it's also going to cover your mistakes, your bad buys. It's going to cover any bloat. If you get into the wrong tribe and you think you need all these tools and you're kind of overloaded with stuff more than you need, that's eaten into that number. So really it's partially your safety net, and to cover, get you back on track if you take a misstep, uh, and it's also growth. So that small amount of money, that $2,000 profit, is vying for two very important categories
Hmm.
that could derail this whole operation, if you decide too early that you want a little bit of a side income. So just be careful. I think that's why I would say don't take any profits yet.
Now, the last thing, and maybe this kind of goes under the reinvesting, is it's very likely, unless you're very well capitalized, that you're going to come up against some sort of capital constraints. You know, if you're starting this with 100% cash, maybe you've saved up or maybe you take a little chunk out of your 401k or whatever you do to start this. All right, but you get good at it. Chances are you're going to come across capital constraints. Actually, I saw a guy on Twitter just this morning. He's a young guy, recently quit his job, went all in on Amazon, and that's where he's coming up right now. Now he's doing more than 10K a month in sales, but he's running out of capital. And he was like, "What do I do? Do I go get another credit card?" But because I'm highly leveraged on my current credit cards, chances are it's probably going to be a fairly small limit on a new credit card. It's understandable. Do I go, and I think he used the word fleece somebody for a loan. I might use a different term, hustle somebody for a loan, or no, but reach out to a friend, a relative, or something like that to get a loan. That's something that I think is, in most cases, a horrible idea. I have given loans to family members and friends. I have received loans from family members. It never goes well, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you know, even if you pay it off in time with interest, it's still, oh, hey, you remember that loan I gave you? That's you want to say thank you again for it. There's always something. You know, uh, and I've seen other people who have asked us straight out, should I go get a home equity line of credit? No, do not do that. Okay. Um, but you are going to come up against capital constraints. We're going to talk a little bit later about going and finding capital when you don't need it, because I don't think enough people do that. And I mean, if anybody else showed us the way, it's Jeff in our last episode, who talked about, asking for money when he did not need it. Because when you are constrained with capital, chances are you're not going to get as much of it as you might want. Um, but for those who are constrained with capital, there are ways to overcome it. Now, I told this to someone the other day, and I said, listen, I said, this is not sexy. I actually told my kids about this the other night too. So my son has been coming, my 10-year-old's been coming to me a lot more recently, and he wants to buy Robux. Um, and I've gotten to the point where I'm like, we've spent enough on Robux for this month. You need to throttle back. I'm like, or you need to go and earn some of your own money. And he's like, well, how can I do that? I don't know how to make money. And I told him to take a walk in the neighborhood on Sunday nights and on Thursday mornings, because those are the trash days in our neighborhood. And the things that I have walked by out at the curb in the trash that are worth money blows my mind. And I'm irritated with myself that I don't have the time to drag each and every one of those items back to my garage to sell myself. Uh, but I told him he could do that. And I gave him some examples. Last week, there was a Traeger grill out at the curb. For those of you who don't know what a Traeger grill is, it's a fairly expensive grill. It's not cheap. Now, maybe it didn't work. Maybe it needed some work done to it, but yeah, little elbow grease never hurt anybody. And I figured that I probably could have bought that thing back to my house and probably resold it for $200. Um, there are some other things you can do. Jeff from our last episode, I actually saw him on a Twitter thread today, and he was talking about going and buying for other sellers who have a much larger bankroll than you do, and maybe getting paid a little bit of a commission. Now, this one is probably a little bit more unorthodox, something that's a little bit harder to find, but there are sellers out there doing 5, 10, 15, 20, $25 million in sales who their constraint is other people to spend their money. Uh, and if you do it right, you could actually make a pretty good living that way, in my opinion. Uh, but you also have to find the people who are going to trust you. So you need to be trustworthy to be able to do that. What are some other ways? I'm sure there's something I'm missing in ways that you could over, overcome some capital constraints.
Yeah, you you'll get your money back a lot faster. Merchant fulfilling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That may be especially when you're getting going. You may want to go down that avenue. Uh, make that a certain percentage. Um, if for no other reason, just simply getting the capital back. Even if the profit margins are a little bit smaller. Just we've talked about the speed of money. And compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. So yeah, it's important to, and especially in this segment, the utility of just flipping basically everything. It's funny, like uh when my dad passed away, he was an avid reader, right? So I got, me and my sister, we had his book collection to deal with, right? And um my sister and I have very different financial philosophies, right? Which I won't go into detail. She may listen to this one day, uh, but they're different, about 180 degrees from each other. So anyway, he had like favorite authors and whatnot, and so he had these collections, like Robert B. Parker wrote the Spencer novels and the Jesse Stone novels, which they've made shows and movies of now. And he has tons of them, right? So I immediately thought, I was like, you know what, these can be batched up into lots of 5 or 6 books. If we just look at the order that they were released, you could have the Jesse Stone collection, volumes 1 through 5, and that could be put together and sold, nothing major, on eBay or something like that. But, maybe you get 10, $15 out of it, and then you sell enough lots, and guess what? You put a little bit of effort in, but you got a few $100 to walking away versus tossing it all in the dumpster, and I remember my sister was like, well, yeah, but that's like $12. Like, and I said, sis, this is what I do. Like that's what it is, just over and over and over again. Like this $12, we have zero buy cost, essentially, besides, emotional anguish and whatnot, but that doesn't, that's not on the P&L. But, I said, basically it's a zero buy cost. And, I said, I'm doing this for a fraction of the $12 that you're scoffing at. I'm doing it for, $2.50 an item, but I said, it's volume, and that's just, so it's like, go around your house. If you're beginning, like I wanted to start with $0, just for the fun of it. I started with an old cell phone. I sold it for $90, and then I took that $90 to Goodwill and started buying the cheapest name brand stuff that I could find. Nike shirts, Nike sweatshirts, Ralph Lauren stuff, and I started tossing that on eBay and just kind of build it up from there. Um, I thought it was kind of like a cool little project, and it was fun. But it's also valuable reps as well. It's essentially, getting what you can and flipping it, and it's all about kind of steamrolling, kind of snowballing your capital, because that's what this entire episode, that's the engine that runs this entire episode, is just continuing to snowball. And you can't scoff at 250 per item, because you're slapping it. It all gets slapped on that same snowball rolling down the hill if you want to get to where you said you wanted to get by listening to this episode.
Yeah. You bring up a great point. I know your buy cost was zero, but that the amount of money that's probably sitting around people's houses is crazy. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna point to something really stupid, but yeah, I happen to be in the cult of Mac, and I have a serious problem. Tim Cook tells me to jump, and I pull out my wallet and ask him, how much do you want today, sir? But whenever I buy a Mac product, I make sure to keep the box, and my kids think it's weird. And I'm like, well, when we go to resell this stuff, it'll make it worth more money. But, you know, when I have to get rid of their phones that they've broken 7 different times, instead of being able to resell it, I could at least resell the box to the phone. And I might be able to sell that for $8, but you multiply that by the 7 or 8 boxes that I've got sitting in a closet. And then, what else is there? Well,
Right.
I've looked at things like Tiffany ring boxes on eBay, and those things sell for $30 or $40 a piece. If you want to, lie to your girlfriend and tell her that the ring you got is from Tiffany, it's only a $30 lie. But there's probably all kinds of stuff like that sitting around people's houses where they could, cut into the money that they have owed on a product, or sorry, on a credit card.
Yeah, and that Traeger grill is this whole thing in a nutshell. There are people that are going to put something like that on the curb just to get it out of the way, and then there are people like us that see dollar signs.
Exactly.
And I think there are far more people that are going to put that Traeger grill on the curb, and that works to our advantage. And that's essentially just build a whole bunch of those. And tell me that's not, if you've read the Millionaire Next Door series, tell me that's not a parallel with what they talk about. A lot of the millionaires, how to become a millionaire, is not giving stuff away, just not being quick to give up the little dollars.
Right.
It's more about not wasting what you have versus what you actually accumulate. You'll find that over and over again in tons of literature.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's move on to kind of like the middle tier, the $10,000 to $50,000 a month. And in my opinion, I don't know that the overall look of going from 0 to 10K to 10 to 50K is necessarily that much different, except for a few key factors. And so my first opinion is, and I know you and I talked about this a little bit before the show, is the learning is still going to need to happen. But there's one critical factor that needs to be played in, and that's, you've got to drop the beginner mindset. That means, no more going to these webinars about how to make $10,000, on Amazon. No more asking people on social media, hey, I've submitted this invoice 2 times and I haven't been ungated yet. What do you think I should do? No ungating questions anymore. The process. The process is the same. Sometimes you just have to beat your head against that wall known as Amazon seller support. But here's my opinion on where things should change. Where are your shortfalls? They're probably, if you're honest at all with yourself, or if you're a little bit self-reflective, you're probably going to be able to know where your shortfalls lie. Is it my sourcing? Is that still the most difficult part? Is it my ability to manage my time? Is it my mindset? Am I throwing my hands in the air when I hit a roadblock and walking away because I don't have the right mindset to push through or tunnel under or climb over? Um, and then one of the other things is that I think that as a beginner, we kind of need to stand in front of the fire hose of information to try to find the signal through the noise. But I think that once we become this intermediate seller, I think that we need to maybe do a little bit more just-in-time learning. So an example for me would be, well, as a beginner seller, I'm standing in front of all this information coming at me, and let's say we're talking about shipping into Amazon. Well, there's going to be people who are talking about SPD or small parcel delivery shipping. There's going to be people who are going to be talking about LTL shipping, which is either going to be partial truckloads or even full truckloads. And I've got to be able to be like, okay, well, I need to know how to do SPD right now because I'm still under that $10,000 a month. But if you're going from 10 to 50, well, you might need to go and figure out how to do your first pallet shipment. Maybe it's just one pallet. It may not even be half a truckload, but maybe I want to do one pallet on maybe my first wholesale order or my first retail arbitrage wholesale hybrid order, which is another thing we could talk about when it comes to sourcing and kind of growing. But you didn't need to know that before, but you needed to know just enough so that in the future you can go and search that information out and learn it just in time to be able to use it now. Um, and I don't know how much just in time learning do you practice, in your own life and business?
Quite a bit. I think this section, ten to $50,000 a month. Uh, these are the sellers near and dear to my heart because I think they're underserved. I think this is the section that um, the gurus don't want to tap into. They're kind of like they're the middle child of the Amazon sellers. They're largely ignored and left to their own devices. So I think a lot of it has to just in time learning by necessity. Just because it's the questions that you're asking and the answers that you're looking for at this stage, they're not necessarily a Facebook group search away. You know, um, and eh, it's funny with like budgeting. You get to a point once you get large enough, or once the budget fills to a certain point, savings becomes difficult. Like that palette example that you used. That to a beginner, it's like, it'll be a long time before I have to worry about that. But then, as an intermediate seller, the prospect, if you said, hey, okay, the volume that you're doing, if you learn this one technique, you could take your shipping cost per unit from 25 cents down to probably under 10 cents per unit. You know, the the beginner's probably going to blow that off, but somebody in this section, their eyes are going to light up, because it's difficult to save that much money, once you get enough plates spinning, if you know what I mean. It's almost like, you know, saving hundreds on your car insurance. It's like, that's, well, I don't know who those people are, what they were paying beforehand, but it can be tough to save chunks like that. So there's a lot of efficiency. So, and the places where you can become more efficient are less obvious, because this is, like I said, an underserved uh, section of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, sourcing. I'm not 100% sure that sourcing really changes too much. However, I think sourcing gets a little bit smarter in this kind of middle tier. So, one, I really think that people start to figure out, or at least start to maybe think about the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule and realize that 80% of their profits are probably being pushed by 20% of their sourcing efforts, but also of the actual products that they're carrying. And I think that a lot of people start diving into, well, and doing some post-mortems on the stuff that they're selling at this range. Why did this work? What qualities did this have that made it such a good buy? And how can I replicate that again and again and again? And the same for the bad products, because we can learn just as much from those as we can from the good ones, maybe more. Why did this tank? Oh, well, yeah, I found this on a lead list. I didn't do any rabbit trailing, and sure enough, it tanked because I didn't increase the size of my moat in any way. But one of the other things I think that should change at this section is your sourcing breadth and maybe your depth a little bit as well. And what I mean by that is I think you can go from 0 to 10K. You can go from 0 to 50K in a single category, obviously. But I think it's safer if you spread that out over more categories, over more products, rather than maybe going super deep. But I think that also, and I touched on this just a second ago, we can do these things like hybrid arbitrage. Maybe that is something that builds your moat a little bit. And maybe you didn't have the ability to do that, from 0 to 10K. Maybe you didn't even know it existed. You had no idea you're used to buying online and having it shipped to you, but you could buy online and go pick it up at store. Do you find a killer lead at Walmart and go into the store and talk to a manager and say, hey, you know what? Is there any way that you could order me 100 or 250 or 500 units of a particular product that you're really sure about? If you're doing retail arbitrage, are you consistently bringing some value to the managers of your local discount stores? Whether it's just a laugh, maybe it's a 12 pack of donuts, maybe it's their favorite bottle of whiskey. But are you doing those things? And then one of the other things is, are you going back to your past leads? Over the weekend, I'm probably gonna mention Jeff multiple times because he's an outlier. Everyone, I say this with kindness if he's watching, but everyone likes to look at freaks, okay? And he's a freak of the Amazon space, doing 25 million in arbitrage, okay? But over the weekend, he was like, oh, let's see if I can do $100,000 of spend in 24 hours. Okay. He's got a huge advantage. And that advantage is he's got this massive catalog of stuff that they've sourced profitably in the past. And he specifically talked about going through his replens. And that was where a majority of his money was spent. Sales we're recording this the week of Mother's Day. And so sales are plentiful. Everyone is scooping up deals. And he was able to take advantage of those sales along with what he's sold in the past to be able to replen items again. And I think once you're at that 10 to 50K mark, you should have, a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand items that you could go through over and over again to see if they've become profitable again. Maybe they're bouncing off the pinch. There's all kinds of different ways that you can sell the same product again profitably.
Bouncing off the pinch, like that flew over too many people's head. That needs to be
right.
The phrasing needs to be more common. Yeah, we're back to efficiency. Like I like when we frame this stuff as far as like numbers. I always think that's a really interesting exercise and helps lend perspective, right? We're in the $10,000 to $50,000 a month in sales range, right? So let's take the high end. Let's say you're $50,000 every single month, right? Now, just very basic calculations. If we're just using buy cost is 50% of what it's going to sell on Amazon, you're buying $25,000 worth of inventory every single month in order to sell that 50,000. Roughly. Don't don't hold us to the numbers or percentages or whatnot, but it's going to fall pretty close to that range. So, no longer, we're not talking about just like big sourcing sessions on weekends and here or there. I mean, you're pretty much at the point where you're sourcing almost every day, if not, definitely every day. Um, you're sourcing more days than you're not sourcing. Let's put it that way, right? Um, so you have to get more efficient at it. There's only so much that you can kind of hunt and peck, and kind of pull, 5, 10, 20 units in order to get to 50,000. That's a grind, and frankly, it's starting to get tough to do, when we're talking the upper ends of the section that we're talking about right now. I still remember in my mastermind, the one, probably the biggest seller we had, it was close to $1 million a year. He said to me the one time, he goes, "You're not going to hit $1 million buying 5 to 10 items at
Mm-hmm.
a time," and the math wasn't, it wasn't quite. It was still a little cloudy, and I was still a bit green, so the math wasn't quite clear at the time, but kind of, part of me wanted to prove them wrong, and part of me
Right.
was like, yeah. So, but those are decisions that you have to, you're probably going to have to buy more units than you've been used to buying, because let's be honest, the unspoken thing about test buys is they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, worst case scenario isn't devastating. It's very, very survivable still. So you're ramping it up. You're getting into quantities and total order volumes that may be a little uncomfortable. So that's, this is, we mentioned it in the beginning of kind of starting to frame it as CEO of a major retail company. This is the next step in that. You're now managing how you're sourcing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about learning to do it. It's not about the actual process. Now it's, okay, how do I, like you mentioned, going back to old leads, you have to find almost $1,000 a day on average in order to hit your 50,000 and keep growing. That's the point,
Yeah.
because it's, it, we're in a, we're in a section here where the low end of this range is a very temporary spot.
Mm-hmm.
um, and this is like a newer thought that's been circling in my mind over and over again. The $10,000 to $15,000 a month seller, as you go from the last section, the beginner section, to now this intermediate section, it's not really a place you want to stay at too long. It's kind of a weird, and maybe this is more like personal experience than I realize, and maybe this isn't generally true on a large scale. Who knows? But like when we talked about 10,000 at 20% profit, which is pretty generous. Like, a couple things go wrong and that number gets chopped down. It's only $2,000 worth of profit, and yeah, I think a lot of sellers can be surprised at what little would have to go wrong, or to eat up a significant portion of that $2,000.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not a slush fund, like this is,
And
you know,
I'm sorry, I want to cut in for a second, but especially now because we've got some new things coming, So let's just say, for example, that you buy a product and you send it in under the wrong ASIN, and now your return rate on that product, goes to, let's just say 50%. 50% of your buyers return that product. The return rate for that particular category is 10%. Well, now you've got a return processing fee that's going to be applied to those units. And there you go. I mean, there is all of your margin, and you're probably going into negative margin territory, if a mistake like that happens.
right. Yeah. So now you've compounded it, and yeah, it doesn't take long when you're in the low end of this range. Um, yeah, it's it's funny, like some of the social media groups. You know, I don't think it was orchestrated by any admins or anything. I think it just kind of took on a life of its own. But if you heard of it, you see people celebrating like the 100,000 club.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, it's funny. So now that I've been thinking about this range, this specifically like 10 to 15,000 is pretty much what I'm kind of fixated on. Simply because I spent too much time in that range. I should have gotten out of there faster. I didn't realize. I thought I was doing better than I was, which is kind of that's what's grinding me. Um, but it's funny, you celebrate, and it's a milestone worth celebrating. I mean, acknowledge it, absolutely. I'm not saying don't do that, but get out of Dodge as soon as possible. Like
Mm-hmm.
make sure, and everybody's time frame, everybody's velocity is unique. I understand that, but it's a very temporary spot, and if it's a stepping stone to bigger and better things, which hopefully that's what it is for the most people, for the majority of people. Um, yeah, but just make sure it's just a pit stop on your way to a further destination. Put it that way.
Right. So I also want to talk about software stack a little bit. Yeah, at the $10,000 to $50,000 a month range, uh, you should have a repricer by now. It does not make sense, and I've seen people take the contrary opinion to this, which I'm fine. Those people are 100% wrong. Yeah, a repricer, even if you're spending, let's go on the high end, okay? On the high end, you're going to spend $500 a month for a quality AI repricer, okay? Um, and that is, that's outside of their disc, all that kind of high end, $500 a month. But based on a repricer being able to keep your inventory competitively priced for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think I did the math one time, and that was under $1 an hour. Okay, at $500 a month. I want to say it was like the 60 cent range or something like that. You can get repricers even with AI for less than that. At $10,000 to $50,000 range, you should be able to pay. I'll just say it. I'm an Aura shill. I happen to be friends with just about everybody there. But you should be at the $97 a month range, I believe. If you use Aura, um, that is incredibly cheap. Uh, you should definitely have Inventory Lab or something similar to it at this range. And here's something a lot of people will maybe balk at, but Inventory Lab is an inventory management system. It keeps your cost of goods sold and other things in there. It is not an accounting solution. Okay. So we've got to put on our big girl pants, and we've probably also got to get QuickBooks or something similar to it, whether that is QuickBooks or Xero or whatever other solution you might want to use. It's also time to maybe think about getting a bookkeeper if you're not very good at keeping your own book. I'm horrible at keeping my own books. One, because it's boring as all get out. But two, I'm also just not good at that kind of stuff. So I have a bookkeeper who handles all my books for me. Matter of fact, I just had to yell at them just the other day. Um, and maybe you need to think about, there are a lot of AI solutions out there for accounting, bookkeeping, things like that. Those would be okay to look into as well. Dylan Carter did a pretty interesting tweet the other week or the other day about like a financial stack that he thought was a good idea. And I think everything was pretty much AI powered. Um, I got to be missing something there. Maybe a CPA as well to handle your taxes at the end of the year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially in the upward portion of this category, that's we're talking $600,000 a year now in sales. So, um, this is where all those little things, that we talked about previously become magnified.
Mm-hmm.
It's you start talking about, that 250 product, as far as like turning it over, like I thought of this when you're talking about the repricer, like get a, if the repricer is going to help you turn your inventory over a percentage faster than it would turn without it, calculate that over the course of a year. You'll be shocked at the value of it. It's going to pay for itself, and that's, it gets into the fine tuning. How much, finding little ways to save, like we talked about with the example of doing a pallet, and
Hmm.
and opening the world of LTL. You're getting into the volumes where these tiny little changes of what felt like, insignificant numbers and percentages in the beginning now can make a big difference, in the numbers and the growth again, because let's not forget there's another category coming up that we want to achieve. So, you know, milking as much and running as lean as possible at the same time. Don't think that this is the time to spend and, go crazy with your overhead too. This is still, it's important to run a lean operation. Uh,
Absolutely. One of the next things, this range that people are probably going to start thinking about is hiring some sort of staff. And by that, I mean a virtual assistant. Now, I think one of the big mistakes that we see is that people in the last stage, people in that 0 to 10K are looking to hire a VA. And you'll notice that Chris and I did not bring this up in the beginner phase because it is a horrible idea to hire someone to do something that you don't know how to do. I see it all too often. Man, I'm having a really tough time sourcing. Does anybody know where I could find a VA? I mean, if that's not throwing a band-aid over a bullet wound, I don't know what is. Uh, it's, you need to, there are going to be so many nuances to your sourcing. There are going to be things that they don't know or they've never been trained on, or they're going to have bad habits from another seller that they may have worked for. And if you're a new seller, you're not even going to know, and you're just going to think that's the way that it's supposed to be. So definitely need to make sure that you know what you're doing before you go and hire a VA. Now, and this means any kind of VA that you hire. Maybe you don't want to hire a sourcing VA, which I think at this stage that's still something that's debatable about whether it's a good idea. Maybe you want to hire someone to help you with a little bit of admin work, like handling account health issues and things like that. That's okay as well. But you need to know how to handle those first before you train someone else how to do them with your process. But I really do think that this is the area where, people they've started to realize that, okay, this model, this Amazon selling model, it works. We validated the process. So now you're kind of figuring yourself out. You're a teenager and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I want this to be? What do I want this to grow up to be? Am I looking for time freedom? Am I going to figure out how to become good with systems and delegation? Am I good at managing others? And these are all some of the things you need to think about before you ever hire a virtual assistant. And to be quite honest, I think I'm horrible at some of these things. Sometimes I think I'm really bad at systems. I think I'm not so great at delegation. I mean, we're 50 episodes in, and I just hired someone to actually do the editing of our podcast finally. You know, I had to have a conversation with our sourcing team just the other day because things have changed and fees have changed, and they came to me and they're like, hey, things are a little bit different. Do you know what's going on? And I was like, oh, I totally forgot to tell you guys because I'm too busy thinking about it, reacting to it, and telling people on Twitter instead of telling the people who it matters to the most, which is the team who's working for me. And so we had a very long conversation about that kind of stuff. I got to be missing something there.
Yeah, well, the fact that we're definitely missing something is also the issue at hand. I think it's referred to as, I've heard it referred to as the curse of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically once you learn how to do this stuff, it's tough to remember back to the beginning, and
Hmm.
that's something you run into with VAs is expecting them to know something that is unreasonable. Simply because you knew it and you learned it so long ago, it's second nature to you. It's very difficult to it can be very difficult to put yourself um, in a beginner's shoes, and roll it back to when you didn't know things as well as you did. Um, that's the kind of the flip side of the coin, is but you're hiring, with VAs, you hire VAs from a position of strength. You're
Hmm.
hiring VAs to save you time, not to solve problems, because it's, technically a CEO is just a problem solver,
Hmm.
and that's your job, running this business. You're hiring the VA to take something off your plate so you can go focus on something that is of higher value.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point about a CEO is a problem solver. And I think that sometimes, for those of us who are maybe not good CEOs, I think sometimes we forget that the answer to a problem is not always the solution. Sometimes it's a who can solve this for me? And maybe it is your VA. If you empower them properly, they may be able to solve the issue for you, and they can report back to you, and you can take responsibility for the outcome and things like that. But it's not always I have to be the person who puts out the fire, and instead it can be I need to direct the person toward the fire to handle it instead of me. Um, I I might be just talking to myself here, which is probably okay. Um,
A lot of these past 50 episodes, this is it's far more self-serving than the audience realizes.
right. So, all right, let's talk about because we're going to be running short on time here, but let's talk a little bit about reinvesting. At the 0 to 50K mark, my opinion is you probably should not be pulling a lot out of the business, especially if the goal is to continue to grow. Now, I know at this area at 50, let's just say 50K a month. I would imagine that there are going to be a lot of people who are getting to that point where they're like, you know what? I really need to consider whether is this something I'm going to quit my 9 to 5 for, or is this going to continue to be a side hustle? And if it's going to continue to be a side hustle, not pulling money out is going to be a heck of a lot easier. But if you are seriously considering this being your full time gig and you're going to tell your boss to shove it, then you're probably going to want to say, okay, well, what can I actually afford to pull out of the business? That way I can make sure that the mortgage is paid. I can make sure that there's food on the table. But I also can still grow at a profitable pace. Maybe it's a little bit slower, and that's okay, but there's still that ramp that I can see for growth. And Chris, you put together a really good scenario to help people understand like what it will do by pulling money out of the business.
Yeah, because let's face it, if you're at $50,000 a month, like we said, you're spending $25,000 a month on inventory. You're approaching an average of close to $1,000 a day. So there's, and you've probably been at it so long. I mean, unless you've just exploded in growth, you've probably been doing this long enough to where there's a little bit of resentment when you sit there thinking about, all right, I sell $50,000, I sell $600,000 a year, and I still can't take anything out. Like that could be a little difficult to wrestle with. You'll start questioning, what the numbers are, because depending on how fast you are, you're pumping that profit back in, and when you're scaling, it's and reinvesting profits, it's easy to think that there aren't any profits, because and technically there's not, because it's not profit, it's growth. It's the growth vehicle, which is essentially what it is. So you also, there's a little bit of a mental hurdle that you need to come up with. But yeah, the sample scenario, you don't have to project it out too long before the numbers start proving start showing the point that we want to show. So, but basically, what I did is I calculated. We're using again the 20% profit margin, and I try to take somewhere in the middle. So, say you're selling $25,000 a month, okay, and at that 20% profit margin, your profit would be $5,000 from that $25,000 a month, right? So now from there, I took two different scenarios. I took reinvesting 100% of the profits, which would be that full $5,000. So because keep in mind, to get to the 25,000, you spend about 12,500 in inventory to achieve the 25,000 in sales. So you have an option now for the following month. You got your 12.5 back as part of the disbursements with the profits. So now you can invest up to 17.5, which should be a $35,000 a month, or you can take some profits. So I ran the two numbers, and if you reinvested 100% of the profits, by the end of 12 months, if you did that over and over again, the value of your inventory would be over $700,000, right? Which would be $1.4 million in sales based on these rough numbers that we're using. The difference, if you took 50% of that, right, just took 2,500, just a modest amount, like it's just a little bit, and then you put the other 2,500 and you reinvested that, project that out over 12 months, and at the end of 12 months, your inventory valuation would be just $111,000, which would be, $222,000 sales. So 1.4 million in sales versus 222,000. That's just a little $2,500 dividend that you pay yourself each month. That's the difference in the scaling. I thought that was incredible, the difference between those two numbers.
It is. It's absolutely insane. I mean, you know, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger were never more right when they said that the eighth wonder of the world is compounding, and this is a great scenario of it. And now I'm gonna remind people, for anybody who's listening to this part, and you're like, oh, well, that assumes everything is perfect. Yes, it does. Okay, because we can't take everything into account. So don't at us, on Twitter.
Not
It is
about that, at
assuming
least.
everything is it is assuming everything is perfect. There's no returns, no refunds, etc. But that is, I mean, the difference there is insane. It's insane on two levels. One, it's insane on how what is really a small chunk can affect the growth over time. But two, it's also insane to see what is possible with an inventory based business on a platform that has just a massive amount of sales every single year. Because this kind of growth is possible. We've seen it happen by others by not taking any profits out of the business and continuing to throw that back into the business. Um, Now, let's talk a little bit about one of the other things that nobody really likes to talk about. But once you're getting from the 10 to 50K a month level, you're probably going to need to spend a lot more of your time on account health, way more than you did, when you're only selling, you know, $5,000 a month in sales. You're going to have inauthentics. You're going to have IP complaints. You're going to have maybe a suspected IP complaint. Maybe you're going to have, the cell batteries or the button batteries issues that pop up. You're going to have all these things that pop up. And there's a couple things you need to do. One, you're going to have to step in and handle these, okay? Because there are a lot of people who don't handle them, and then those things compound over time too, and you end up losing your account because you didn't take care of them. And you need to have a process, You're going from 0 to 10K. It's very possible that all of your invoices, all of your receipts and stuff like that, it's just in your archived Gmail account. You don't have it set up to go into folders. You don't have a Google Drive set up. But, when we're getting to this middle area, we need to have this locked down so things are easy to find. You have all the documents, you have any images that you might want to save, that kind of stuff, so that you can handle these issues. Um, and you might just be on the cusp, or maybe you're there where you want to hire someone to help. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that expensive. There are services for $89, $100 a month that will handle IP complaints, that will take care of you if you get suspended. It does not have to be crazy. But you do need to make sure that everything is in order so that you can fight these. I think my opinion is that 99% of everything can be handled if your documentation is correct and you're willing to submit it enough times. Do you think I'm off base there?
No, not at all. I mean, that's you have to be correct, because again, another assumption that we're making in this is that you're doing things the right way, right? So
Right.
I mean, unless like we talked about TA organizing by popularity, and eBay is the second most popular searched site. Like,
That's
what do you
scary.
got? What are you guys doing out there? Like, like if it is authentic and somebody challenges it as inauthentic, you know, they're wrong, you're right. It's just a matter of getting Amazon to see it, that
Mm-hmm.
way. It's and one of my favorite tweets that I personally put out there is dealing with account health issues is a lot like arguing with a spouse. You're right, but somehow that doesn't matter.
And you've got to say you're sorry.
Right, and yeah, you'll be apologizing in the end, and
Yeah.
walking on eggshells for the foreseeable future.
Oh, that's
My
funny.
wife hates that joke.
That's a good one though. Uh, we do make this all sound fairly easy, and in my opinion, it is all fairly simple. Don't mistake simple for easy. Uh, you know, uh, the heartache that comes with having to deal with seller support or anybody that works at Amazon is deep. It cuts deep. Hey guys, wanted to take a quick second and thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about going from the 50 to 100K a month mark. And for those of you on YouTube, you may have noticed that there has been a wardrobe change. It's because this ended up going a lot longer than we expected, and we ended up having to do it in a two-part recording. But when you and I were talking about this off air, Chris, one of the things that I think we found the most interesting about this is how your learning needs to change, between kind of these different levels. At the beginning, you kind of have to stand in front of that fire hose. And then in the middle, you're learning a little bit more about, okay, well, I need to get rid of the beginner mindset. I don't need to ask that ungating question again, but I need to look more at where my own shortfalls, and I need to learn how to be better at just in time learning rather than trying to make sure I know everything. Now, I think that maybe this becomes an even more stark contrast as we go to this next level, where maybe we've hired our first VA, and now we're thinking about hiring another one. Maybe it's a sourcing VA, maybe it's an admin VA, maybe it's just an executive assistant to try to really be able to have that that lifestyle that we want. And so now we've got to become a manager. How do we delegate properly? How do we build a team culture when everyone is kind of dislocated? Everyone is maybe they're overseas, maybe you've got one person in the US, but mean, you're not going to have an office selling on Amazon. Most likely, you might, once you get to a certain size. But then the other thing is you've got to learn how to properly hire people. Uh, because honestly, human capital, which I don't necessarily like the word human capital, but I mean it's something that businesses are going to use. Uh, it's one of the most difficult things to do. I read an interesting tweet from a guy. He said that I think they were hiring an admin VA. He put an advertisement out there. It got 2,400 uh, people who applied. He said out of those 2,400, three people followed the instructions. If you're not careful, if you don't even craft your advertisement correctly, you're not going to be able to instantly narrow down to those three. You're going to have to go through those 2,400 applications one by one by one because you're not filtering them out on the front end. And you may not know how to do that if you've never hired before. But then what about the other side to that where you say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and hire somebody, but maybe they're not working out, and you've got to. I mean, firing is the worst. I remember
Right.
I had to let somebody go at the end of 2023. I made sure to pay him his 13th month. I made sure to wait until after the holidays were over. I tried to do everything that I could. I even gave him a severance, and he hadn't been with me even a year, but I gave him like a 2 week severance. I tried to do everything that I could to cushion the blow. But at the end of the day, I felt like a real asshole, you know,
Hmm.
having to let somebody go and him telling me that, he's gonna, his family's gonna be upset with him. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but you know we've tried this and that, we've tried to train and it's just not working out, so we've got to go in a different direction, and you should probably look for something that's maybe better for your abilities. I wanted to be honest with him so that he could take that feedback and hopefully use it in a constructive manner, but I also felt like crap. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to keep paying him. uh
Yeah.
so how to do that the right way. And then on top of all of that, on top of trying to figure out how to be, the manager slash coach slash motivator of your business, you also need to make sure that you're properly cash flowing. You know, it doesn't matter what size you get to. Uh, you know, the you can end up going under if you are not managing your cash flow properly. I mean, I think we talked a little bit earlier about a company that was going out of business, but look at Red Lobster. They didn't realize their bottomless shrimp was gonna put them put them under, and look what happened. You know.
Yep.
Um, so what other things do you think you need to learn when you're starting to really kind of crest that hill to the seven-figure seller area?
I don't think you can stress the importance of the skill of hiring. It's a completely different boat. It's because let's face it, we're getting into the volume, sales volume, and the size of a store to where y- y- you're basically going to have functions that aren't directly under your nose.
Mhm.
Like when we're talking about hiring, these people that you're hiring, you have to have complete trust in, because you're not going to have time. You're going to find yourself short of time to kind of helicopter over every last little bit. So there are going to be functions of your store and your operations that you just have to trust are taken care of by the people that you put in place to take care of it.
Yeah.
So hiring, getting good at hiring is very important. And now, and maybe that's worth mentioning too, is we're getting into skills that you need as a store owner that you can't learn through the process of growing your business. These are kind of independent. These are skills that kind of came in on their own. out of necessity, of the size that you're at. It's sourcing and taking care of your account health. This is all stuff that you handled at first, and then you got big enough to where you needed to pass it off, and you could pass it off. Like,
Hmm.
but stuff like hiring and kind of maintaining employee relationships, you don't really get that as you work your way up, which is
Yeah.
kind of unique.
Yeah, I mean, now I didn't go to college. I definitely didn't go to business school, but one of the things that I've never learned in too many places other than the books that we've read is like, how do you get someone else who doesn't have a vested interest in your business to take ownership of the problems that come from a business like it is theirs, you know?
Hmm.
And that's not a skill that I mean, none of our quote unquote normie friends would ever even probably think about that, let alone talk about it. But that's one of those soft skills that you need to be able to cultivate. How do I coach someone into a position where not only do they want to do a good job because they're collecting a paycheck, but they actually want to own a problem like the owner would, instead of just you know being someone who transfers that back to you, because that's that of all the things that I read and listen to, that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people do as business owners is they hire to fix problems that they have in their business so that they can give a problem they have to someone else, but it ends up becoming this circle. uh, the problem goes to the employee says, I can't figure it out, goes to the boss says, okay, well, I'll just do it. I'll just deal with it because it's easier than trying to either teach someone the skill to figure it out or find the person who is actually going to own that problem. Um, I mean, heck, I'm not great at it. I wish I were better at it.
And here's maybe devil's advocate a little bit. Uh, what if it's not possible? Like I don't think it's necessarily a given that you can hire people that will take ownership. You also have to have the ability to build SOPs and processes in place to where if you get a body to take that job and you hire, that it can be done in that 8-hour shift and that's it.
Hmm. Yeah.
It may be it's possible to overstep thinking that you could actually have someone that will get that invested in the business. You
I
have to allow for, you know, um, just the just a not worker bee, not that's a little degrading, it sounds like, but just somebody who's not interested, just wants to put their time in and go.
hmm I think that's fair. And so, okay, we're gonna end up going down some esoteric path here if we're not careful. But uh, the question comes to mind: um, are too many business owners looking for that unicorn when? And how do we change our minds as a business owner? Like, you know what? It's okay. I'm not going to replicate myself. I'm not going to be able to find someone who cares as much. And how do I become okay with having someone who wants to clock in, work there 4 out of 8 hours, because if we're being honest, nobody actually works 8 hours, work there 4 out of 8 hours, collect their paycheck for 8 hours and then go home. How do we become okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, kind of have to temper your expectations, and I catch myself doing that just with the VAs and the prep help that I have. It's what's common sense to you, uh, isn't necessarily common sense to someone that you're paying a few bucks an hour in a different country.
Hmm.
It's and that's you got to be conscious of it. That it takes a little bit of effort and it's kind of has to stay in the front of your mind. Until you get that down, it's because it's tough. It's I find myself just internally just going, "What the hell are you thinking?" And then but by the time I kind of sit with it and approach the person, I have to be more rational.
Yeah.
at that point. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm reading. YouTube is definitely going to comment about that dueling repositioning of the seats. We,
Right.
we kind of we lifted up in the chair at the same time. Uh, it's funny, I'm reading a book called The Founders right now, right,
Hmm.
and it's about the start of PayPal, right,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm
I've heard
still
good things about that book.
I tell you what, I'm about a quarter of the way through, and if it stays consistent, it's going to end up being excellent. But we're still kind of meeting the players, and kind of you're doing a little bit of background and whatnot, and because PayPal was actually the combination of two different companies that kind
Hmm.
of came together. Elon was doing his own, which I didn't realize he initially uh, was X.com. So,
Hmm.
um, and then there was Confinity, I think, or something like that. But they ended up merging and whatnot. But it's funny. But they talk about as they're expanding, and they're getting rounds of funding. Uh, their hiring process, and they passed on good people because they didn't basically they didn't meet the vibe check,
Hmm.
and it was, and then you talk to some employees that the author interviewed, and you'll have people saying, I had never met anybody with that kind of energy. Like there were tons. I could have gotten a job anywhere. Coding jobs were all over the place at that time in California. But it was the energy. It was like you could just feel. But we're talking about a startup there. Like
Right.
this is an e-commerce business. Like you're not going to be, you're not going to be traded on, the Nasdaq or anything like that. So it's like again, you got to kind of like just pull it back a little bit on the people that you think might be willing to jump on board of something you're passionate about. I mean that's
Hmm.
obviously that's you have to be passionate to grow it to that point. However, I think it might be a little misguided to think that the people you're going to bring on are equally as passionate.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fair. I'm gonna bring up one other little thing about outsourcing because I mean a lot of when we're talking to Amazon sellers, we're talking to e-commerce. Yeah, of course, not a lot of people are looking to necessarily hire uh, in the U.S. A lot of them are going to be looking to hire outside the U.S. But I think that at this point, you get to the point where it's no longer I'm just looking for that person who's going to make $3 to $5 an hour. Um, and this is for a couple of reasons. One, the person who may have the mental horsepower to do the kind of work that you want to do is not going to come for $3 to $5 an hour. But the other thing is that I really think that we're going to very soon see the end of the $3 to $5 hour an employee overseas. The Filipino employee for $3 to $5 an hour. I think that's got a real short fuse left on it because we are seeing outsourcing become bigger than ever. And for the past 5 to 7 years, maybe more than that. I mean, people were hiring VAs, 10 years ago when I got into this. Um, but for the past 5 to 7 years, it was the only people I ever saw talking about it were Amazon sellers and e-commerce folks. But now, I've seen dentist office hire virtual assistants from the Philippines to man their front desk, via a video chat. And you walk into the dentist office and you're greeted with a person at a computer who checks you in and cold calling and doing all these things. I know somebody who runs an insurance agency. They don't do any of their own quotes. They send them out to virtual assistants to do all the quoting, get it back, and then their job is to sell the insurance. um, and we're seeing this more and more and more, and companies with deeper pockets are going to come in and say, oh well, we're not going to hire someone for $5. Well, we could just pay them $8, and we don't have to pay someone $35 here in the US, which ends up being more per hour when you talk about benefits and things like that. Um, so that's something to think about. We're going to end up having to pay for top talent more than we do now in the future. Um, so,
That's both interesting and depressing.
right.
It's
I'm
kind of interesting that like we potentially could be getting a taste of the argument that the big box like Walmart's. You remember people hated Walmart because it pushed the mom and pops out, and Amazon, people are mad at Amazon because it's people are looking up Amazon listings in their brick and mortar stores and stuff, and it may be companies like that have some size that end up pushing us out of cheap virtual labor.
right. I would imagine there's going to be another, marketplace. It's because it's not just the Philippines anymore. There's a lot of outsourcing in Latin America and India, and if you want some high quality coding done, you might go to Eastern Europe. Um, but I guess how long is it before wages around the world kind of catch up a little bit? I don't know. I don't know if that's something that's 2 years down the road or 10 years down the road, but I see a whole heck of a lot more talk about it. And uh, somebody on Twitter just bought a virtual staffing agency for $20 million, thinking that they're going to be there. It's going to be worth it because of what they think the the market size is for this type of business for the next 10 years.
Hmm, that's wild. Yeah, and
Yeah.
the one the one thing that to throw in there is uh, the necessity of it, because I,
Hmm.
I believe I saw the same dentist office. They have a virtual assistant on the video chat out of necessity because they couldn't find somebody to fill the receptionist position.
Right.
So that could, that could kind of kink the progression of this overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've exhausted that rabbit trail, let's talk a little bit about some of the other skills that you might need. One is the ability to locate capital. You get to this point, and you might be coming up to the place where it's a little bit harder to have all the capital that you need at all times, unless you're just flush with cash or get a small $5 million loan from your dad, like some business owners have. Um, but something I was fascinated by with Jeff in our last podcast was he talked about the times of year when he goes and talks to banks, when he negotiates with credit cards. It's not when you absolutely need the capital. You don't do it in November 1st when you've run up your credit cards from Halloween. They're not paid off yet. You do it in January and February when you've paid down all the credit cards, you've paid down the lines of credit, and it looks like you don't need the money, because that's when people want to give it to you a whole lot more often. Uh, and then he also talked about like playing credit cards against each other. Calling, I think was it Capital One, I think, but calling, one credit card and saying, "Hey, American Express is willing to give me 750K. You want to match that?" And I don't think that people think about it quite often. This I've done this at a much smaller scale and called one credit card company and said, "Hey, I've got this credit card, and they've given me a $30,000 credit limit, and you guys have me stuck at 18. Like, I'd rather use you. You want to bump that up?" Um, and you can do the same thing at much larger scale, and that's the time to really start doing this. Uh, and maybe it's time to do what you've done and get like an SBA loan, and there are other things too. I'm sure there's something I'm missing there.
Yeah, it's credit is it drives me nuts how it works. You even have it on a person. It's happened to me personally. Like there's definitely a balance. You have to stay like in this middle ground. Like in order to have a whole bunch of credit, you need to make sure you don't use it. or
Hmm.
just only use it a little bit, like, um, the best, in case anybody doesn't know it, as far as your personal credit goes, the biggest benefit that you can get from a credit account is to have it at 30% of the balance or less.
Hmm.
That's the positive. And then conversely, I've heard, and I don't know if any of this is documented. I just kind of learned it through my various professions. Um, basically, there's no positive effect to your credit once you go over 50% of a credit limit,
Hmm.
on a credit account. So
Interesting.
so yeah, so it's definitely, the less you need it, the more likely you are to get the credit. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you kind of have to prospect it a little bit. Um, but at the same time, like you mentioned with the relationships, you can do it like with you talked about credit limits, but it works with interest rates as well.
Hmm.
You can definitely negotiate your interest rate and say, hey, this card has, a margin over prime, that's 3% less than what you're offering, but we have 5 years of history together. I'd like to stay with you guys, and what can you do? Um, so yeah, so all the stuff is negotiable. Um, and now think about it. We're talking about in the 50 to $100,000 a month range. There is a bit of flexing that can be done. This is
Hmm.
the time where, yeah, you have relationships, but you're a valuable commodity to the people that you're doing business with, from the financial aspect of it.
Yeah.
So use that leverage, use the leverage comes with this size,
Absolutely.
and
If you go talk to a banker, there's, and I'm talking a business banker, whether that's at a local branch or even at like a local Chase branch, they're not seeing a ton of businesses that are seeing, 50, $100,000 a month come through those accounts. I know that I know, Chase might handle businesses that have Swift accounts doing millions and millions a month, but it's not the local branches that are dealing with those kinds of people. uh, the local branches are dealing with, the guy who owns the lawn care company. They're dealing with the people who own the local auto repair place, and they're not putting up the kind of numbers that you can do in an Amazon business. And I think that maybe a lot of Amazon sellers, you know they're like, oh well, I'm doing $100,000 a month. That's peanuts, because I've heard of this guy doing 13. I've heard of this guy doing 25 million a year. Uh, and so they belittle themselves a little bit, when in the little local pond you're in, you're actually probably a pretty big fish.
yeah, yeah, there are definitely some uh, relationship managers or whatever the bank calls that would be very happy if they knew the numbers to see you walk in the branch.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that talking about capital and credit brings up a kind of interesting personal anecdote. So I got a notification. I sign up to a credit monitoring service just to make sure, in case anything happens, and I get an alert. Well, I got an alert the other day, and it was, hey, your credit score changed. So I looked at my credit score, and it first time in my life, it it just topped over 800. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, I remember when I was a teenager, I saw my grandfather have this, and I was like, oh man, he's in this elusive area that, I'll never be there. And my very first thought was, I should probably go get another credit card. But my wife, on the other hand, she'll get a credit card she'll get one of those automated credit card applications in the mail, and like it gives her anxiety. She's like, I don't need another credit card. And I'm like, yeah, but you take credit cards when you don't need them. I'm like, that way, if there is a need for them, you have them. And she's like, no, I can't do that. She's like, if I have more than two, I won't be able to sleep well at night. And that's how entrepreneurs are wired so different, I think, than regular folks. But
Yep.
So one of the other things you probably want to think about once you're starting to get to this, this 50 to 100K level is diversification. Um, and I don't necessarily, I mean this in a couple of different ways. If you've got an Amazon business and it's your cash flow vehicle, uh, you know, sure, you could go and start, investing in real estate, and that would be fine. But what I mean by diversification is if you've gotten to $100,000 a month with, let's just say, just storefront stalking, I think some people will say, "Oh, that's not possible." Yeah, it is. I watched a lady on Twitter do it. She says she exclusively stalks storefronts, and she has hit $1 million a year in sales. You know, uh, so it's probably time to start diversifying your sourcing strategies. Maybe I need to, okay, well, if I'm crushing it with storefront stalking, let's also just do some regular manual searching. Or maybe I have one of my team members do some manual searching for me. That way we've got leads coming in both directions. Or maybe it's, hey, you know what? I really crushed this online arbitrage. Let's add in a retail arbitrage shopper to go out and pick up the dollar bills that are on all the shelves around us. Um, but also, I don't think there's anything wrong with adding wholesale or private label to your diversification strategy. There's nothing wrong with cash flowing OA or RA and having a private label product. I've seen two people do this and they're doing it well. Um, um, I can't remember his Instagram handle, but his name's Phil. It's filled by Amazon. That's what it is. But he's growing a private label brand in addition to his OA. So he's going to have hopefully something that he can sell as an asset later on down the road, which we could argue about whether or not OA businesses are sellable or not. I actually think in the right circumstance, if anything is cash flowing and it has processes and some sort of moat, you could probably sell it. But he'll have a brand that he could sell. We talked to Jeff. He's growing his wholesale side of his business. It's I say growing. It's already like 10 million, or some right around there. So it's a good size business. But there's nothing wrong with doing multiple things on one platform, um, in my opinion, or maybe even adding in another marketplace. Maybe you start selling on Walmart. Maybe you really try to get really good at eBay. Or maybe you even start selling some of the products that you buy for dirt cheap locally and having some warehouse sales if you got enough inventory to do.
Yeah. It's if anything, I think private label and wholesale, like, and we've talked about this from the very beginning, like the arbitrage is kind of looked at as just a stepping stone to something bigger, and
Yeah.
this, and fortunately we've been able to have the guests on that help us prove, what we contended from the very start, that arbitrage itself, just by itself, can be a very large operation.
Hmm.
Um, so we're kind of looking at it from a different perspective. I think a lot of people probably come to this episode, you know, thinking that well, arbitrage, we have to go PL or we have to go wholesale in order to get to these numbers. That's um, so you got to kind of back out of that line of thinking, because we know for a fact that arbitrage can definitely get you to $1 million. So, um, but what a nice prospect that is, in order to hit, if your goal is to be $1 million seller and you could do it solely on arbitrage. Now you have, I don't know, luxury. Do we want to call it the luxury of being able to now branch out and really proliferate your business? If you end up really setting your mind to it and trying to do it well, something like wholesale or private label, that's
Hmm.
it's
And
it's interesting, the shift, because it's not the way anybody thought when I first got into this industry,
right.
and started looking at reading stuff in the space.
Yeah, it seems like you picked a lane and then you stuck to it. and now it's okay. And I don't know. I'm not going to say that we're the ones who broke down those barriers, but it's okay to be like, oh, you know what, I've got a business, and that business does OA and RA on one side, and we've also got we've got a wholesale division. You know, I'm the GE of Amazon sellers. I've got all these different divisions under one house. And I don't know, maybe more people need to start thinking like that, because there are different opportunities. If you go the private label route, and um you're using your OA and RA business to kind of maybe cash flow your private label product. Down the road, you could, if you wanted to, you could take that out to other marketplaces. You could go direct to consumer. You could take a private label product and do wholesale with it. And what I mean by that is you could actually wholesale it to brick and mortar locations, and sell it that way, or get it into some mom and pop shops. We've seen that with, this is a bit of an outlier brand, but Anchor, they started as an Amazon first brand, but now you can go to Best Buy and other places and buy their product. Uh,
Mhm.
and so it is doable.
Yeah, I think it's funny. You probably the tell. I'm just guessing here, but I think that the tell is depending on what content you're consuming. Uh, don't discount how they talk about what they did before. Meaning there are a whole lot. I've seen a whole lot of wholesale gurus and teachers. Well, yeah, I think they all pretty much have something for sale in the end. But the ones I'm talking about that say, well, online arbitrage, you can only go so far with that, and they kind of have this negative opinion of what they started in,
Hmm.
and that that kind of in my mind that's a tell. It's like, okay, something happened, or like you didn't do it very well. I think that's a fairly safe assumption. So I mean, I would feel much better about somebody who said, "Yeah, you know what? I did OA, RA, I did the arbitrage model, grew that up to 2-3 million, and then decided to branch out into wholesale. Just to kind of make the sourcing part of it a little bit easier or whatnot. Like, but you think about it, think about the skills that we've talked about. The hiring, the outsourcing, all that stuff. If you have all that perfected, or at least running smoothly, it's only going to aid to the success of what you try to branch out into.
Hmm.
The diversification that you try from there on out.
Yeah. So next thing we should probably talk about is a little bit about sourcing. We talked about diversification, but at this point, it's very likely that you could probably still source everything on your own, but you may want to have some help. And so you may need to shift your mindset a little bit, away from, I got to be in the trenches, if we want to call them that. I got to be in the trenches sourcing all the time, to being able to create playbooks so that others can source for you. And everyone that we've talked to who's grown their businesses has done this in some fashion or another. And now the targets, they do move, as things change, so will, minimum profit margins and things like that. So it needs to be something that you can change over time and can grow with your business. But you might also want to figure out, how are you going to properly, pay those folks? Are you going to use some sort of commission structure? Are you going to pay hourly? Uh, you know, but the whole point is you get to 50 to 100K a month, you get to this seven-figure point, chances are you're probably not going to want to stop there. You're probably going to want to continue to grow. And to do that, you're going to need to be able to increase your spend. Um, and then one of the other things that I don't think some of the newer sellers do as much as they probably should is you need to have a way to be tracking sales so that when you can go and you can strike really hard. We're recording this right before Mother's Day, And we know everyone's been talking about it. It's time to go super hard on all these sales. Like, let's get after it. Let's get to it. Uh, Big sellers know that too. They knew about it, a couple of weeks ago, and they were getting primed and ready to strike these sales before everyone else did, and maybe clear some shelves before other people did. Uh, and you're getting to the point once you hit seven figures that you need to have something like this for yourself, in my opinion.
It's funny. It's kind of a Lion King moment, the circle of life, because in the very beginning, you can't find enough to buy, and
Hmm.
because whether it be, you're gated or, you're not that good at sourcing. And then it likely comes all the way around to this section to where you can't find enough to buy, like
Hmm.
that's likely going to be one of the roadblocks that you face. Whether that be the sources or whether it be the time that you spend sourcing,
Hmm.
because depending on the method that you're using, it could take a lot of time. you know it's obviously the importance of learning, what you've learned to this point, of the sites that you can access. Not only knowing sales cycles, you also need to know which stores you can get serious volume from,
Hmm.
because you're at the point now where your orders, those dollar figures are pretty large, in
Yeah.
order to do these numbers. So obviously, some sites you can spend that much money, and other sites, you're going to have to get creative if that's the way that you're going to obtain enough inventory to maintain the volume that you're at.
Yeah. Um, Cash flow management at this stage probably needs to change as well. Now, hopefully, you were doing this from the very beginning. And if you weren't doing this kind of at the middle section, now is the time to get really serious about bookkeeping. Your books need to be clean. Whether you're using QuickBooks or some sort of AI program or whatever it is, you need to have an understanding of what's coming and what's going. And we've said it multiple times. We've used multiple examples of businesses, even businesses doing massive revenue numbers that are going under because they don't know what's actually going out the door, or they screwed up something. This is also probably the time when you should maybe try to remove yourself. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, a bookkeeper, they want to charge me $300 a month or $400 a month. How much time are you spending on your books? And is it worth it? I remember, we had a little family insurance agency. My grandfather was the proprietor, and every week, it was probably 10 to 15 hours that he was spending going through the books and making sure that they were right. Uh, but he could sell $100,000 insurance policy to someone in that same amount of time. And I'd watched him do it. I watched him insure, apartment complexes or semi truck businesses or towing businesses where they're going to spend $100,000. His commission on that would be roughly 10%. So, $10,000, and it takes 15 to 20 hours worth of work. But instead, he was foregoing spending $300 or $400 a month so that he could input, the rent check into QuickBooks every single month. Um, and at the time, I thought he's being frugal. That's absolutely genius. But in reality, it was a horrible decision because the cost outweighed the potential uh, by by an order of magnitude, you know. So
Mm.
even if you got to bite that bullet a little bit, even if you've got to pay that, $300-400 a month to have someone properly keep your books, this would be the time, if you haven't already done it, to make sure that you do it. And the thing that will come out of having your books done right is you should be getting like a monthly or a quarterly profit and loss statement, and you can use that profit and loss statement to make decisions about your business. Are my operating expenditures too high? And if they are, what am I spending on in my operating expenditures that maybe I could cut back? You know, your favorite word, the bloat, that it creeps in there. Where can we trim that fat?
Mhm.
Or are your cost of goods sold, are they too high compared to your sales? If you're getting over 55% or so in cost of goods sold, it's going to be awful hard to make any money. And your profit and loss statement should be able to tell you that kind of thing if you're taking a look at it. What did I miss there?
Well, let's face it. At this size, your store is big enough to prove that old saying correct that a good CPA is free.
Hmm.
Because they're going to find inefficiencies, and they're going to save you more than what you're paying them. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a reason people like Jeff Bezos spend like $300,000 a year, probably more than that. I bet he spends like 1 million or more on his tax team.
Right.
But if we want to be one of the big boys eventually, we need to do what they're doing on a smaller scale, and have a team who can properly advise you. And if your CPA is telling you to go buy that Mercedes, the G wagon, because you can write it off on your taxes, maybe go find someone else, because that's probably probably not the best business move. Um,
Right.
Now, account health. This is one of the other things that, in my opinion, becomes even more important at this level. Now, account health is important at all levels. I always feel really bad when a brand new seller gets suspended because of an account health issue, because likely newer sellers who come onto the platform are hearing from friends, from family members, yes, that's selling on Amazon thing, that's a scam, and they're 2 weeks in and something happens and they get suspended and they're like, you're absolutely right, they were right, this is a scam. Um, the middle area, you don't want to get suspended, but once you're doing, 50 or $100,000 a month, you might be floating some capital out there that's a hefty chunk of change, you know. And if you're floating it on an American Express Plum card for 60 days and you get suspended, um, and that bill comes up, you might have an oh shit moment on your hands, if you can't get it fixed quickly. So my opinion is that even though your account may be able to withstand some more account health dings, it should probably be something that is forefront in your mind at all times. Now, whether you're doing this by bringing a service on hand, like an attorney, or I mean, there's Jeff Schick, there's Seller Candy, there's all these different services that will help you fight IP complaints, make sure that inauthentic complaints are dealt with, or if you're bringing somebody in house to do it, or I mean, or if you're handling it yourself. But as long as you're doing it on a regular basis, that is the most important part. I was, I was. Do you remember the number that Jeff said that they were spending on account health a lot of weeks?
I don't.
40 hours of a full-time person dealing with account health issues, you know. Now,
Yeah.
his scale is much larger than most of us will probably ever get to, you know, but still, even if you're doing a quarter of that and you need to spend, a quarter of the time, 10 hours a week, is that really something that you should be handling yourself? Or is it better to hire someone for, $200 a month to be able to handle those IP complaints, handle those inauthentic complaints? And do you have a system in place to make sure that all of your documents are on hand? You should have had this already, but if you don't, it's really time to have a come to Jesus moment and have a system in place so that everything is there. And and let's talk about this for a second, because you were right, Chris. There's probably going to be a lot of people who who come into this section, they just fast forward over everything else, you know? So when you have something like an inauthentic complaint, a lot of people say, well, they won't accept my receipt. That's because you're not saving the right things. You need to have the proof of purchase, which can be a receipt. You need to have the proof of delivery. You need to make sure that you can backtrack that to the credit card that you purchased it on. And if you didn't use a credit card and you used a discount gift card instead, well, what credit card did you use to purchase that discount gift card? And can you show the trail from the discount gift card site to the credit card and the purchase from the website to the discount gift card so that you can draw this map for Amazon to make sure that they know that the stuff is yours. And then do you have, proof of delivery? I was helping someone yesterday and they didn't have proof of delivery, so I went out to UPS and pulled up their tracking number, got a nice picture of the box right on their front porch. I'm like, this is what you need, this is what you're missing. You know, you should have a system to have all of that in one place so you don't have to go searching for it later on down the road. Um, what else do you have in your systems for keeping track of account health?
Well, specifically, sticking with inauthentics, you also be wary of where you're getting the products from. Whether the
Hmm.
store that you're purchasing from uses their own identification numbers as opposed to the product's UPC. Like we talked with Perry and Kim. They're the part of their process is taking a picture of the product itself, next to the receipt, in order to connect the dots between the store's identifier and the UPC.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing to consider is all those steps that you talked about. As you once you get to a certain size, those steps may not be completed by you anymore. Depending on
Right.
what you've outsourced and who you have working, which is again, we're into the at the very beginning of this section. You're more of a manager. So now
Hmm.
you have to make sure the people that you hire, the people that you have in place, are doing this without fail. Um, because the overarching theme, the unspoken theme of this section is how much is riding on this.
Hmm.
There's a lot at stake at this point. You're pushing $1 million, a year at this point. You're getting close to that goal. So um, it just makes all this stuff all the more important, um, because it's on a much larger scale.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. So I think I just lost whatever else it was I was going to say.
um, one of the other things we should probably talk about. Sorry, I was going to try to search the. I want to talk a little bit about congratulating yourself as well. You know, there are at this point, you're doing $1 million a year, and again, a lot of Amazon sellers like, oh well, I just got to seven figures. Seven. Oh well, there's plenty of people doing eight figures. And I don't know the number, but most businesses, small businesses in the US, there's about 6 million, or above the 6 million small businesses that have employees. 49% of them only have 1 to 4 workers. you know they're not really big businesses. I was trying to find out like how much in revenue they're actually doing, but that's a little harder to find on the fly here. But I think I want to talk
Mm,
about that one of these days, because I would bet you that that most of them are probably not doing the numbers that you might think of a small business. You know, they're not doing seven figures a year in revenue, and
right.
so we need to congratulate ourselves for getting there. But more importantly, once we get to the seven figure area, we really need to think about how we want to grow and how we want to reinvest in the business. If you haven't already, it's probably time to really start thinking about putting yourself on a salary, where you get an actual W 2 paycheck from your business, that's paying taxes and things like that. But you also, you don't have to pay yourself everything via a salary. I would suggest you don't. Just pay what's necessary, uh, and you can work the system by taking out a dividend or something like that from the business. That way you don't have to pay the all the taxes on everything you take out. But and we're not financial, we're not accountants or anything, so don't be don't be following us for financial advice about how you take money out of your business and do it legally. Um, but you need to pair how you pay yourself against how aggressively you want to continue to grow. You know, is getting to seven figure, like, is that it? Yeah, I got to seven figures. I'm happy. I'm good. I'm comfortable. That's okay. You know, that's not a bad thing. But do you want to be 5 million? Do you want to be? I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I know that they're in the mid seven figures. And he said to me, he's like, and I was like, yeah, I was like, dude, we got to have you on the podcast. And he's like, oh, well, I'm only mid seven figures. And I'm like, now you're top 1% OA sellers, dude. I'm like, he's like, well, I'm gonna be eight figures by next year. And I'm like, I believe you. Like, I'm sure you will. Um, you know, is that your growth strategy? Is it from going to mid seven figures to eight figures in a year? And if so, your your ability to take capital out of the business is going to be way different than if you're happy to just coast, at seven figures for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's interesting what changes and what doesn't change. The same sentiment is echoed in the very beginning.
Hmm.
Pulling money out of the business too early. That's going to inhibit your growth. It doesn't necessarily go away.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of numbers that are set when you talk to sellers, a lot of it is set via how much they want to make from the business.
Right.
Which that kind of makes all of these steps, all the minutia, even more important. Because
Hmm.
everything filters down to the bottom line. So if you
Yeah.
try to, force your business into paying you, that dollar figure, that annual salary that you set as the ultimate goal, um, it could hurt growth. It could severely dampen cash flow. There's you have to be mindful of the wake that it's going to leave. As far as
Hmm.
your operations. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
So, I mean, I think we've gone through just about everything. I mean, there's all kinds of things I'm sure we've probably missed, across this, but I think that this gives people a high level ability to be able to grow from nothing to a seven figure business. But there are some other soft skills that I think people need to have. Uh, and our last episode goes way into more depth on this. And I know this is going to be trite and cliche and all that, but you you need to know how to network. And for me, one of the most important things about networking is at each of these different stages, there's going to be a different kind of problem or a different set of problems that you're going to come up against. you know and when you're a beginner, the guys or the girls that you may be hopping on Zoom with and sourcing with, after work, may not be the same people who you can go to say, well, how should I properly set up my corporate structure and pay myself a salary to make sure that I can also reinvest as much money as possible to continue to grow? Or, are those the same people who you can say, hey, do you have any relationships with a banker or an SBA loan officer that I might be able to talk with, that you've been happy with? Or, who's your CPA who saved you 20% on your tax bill? If the people you started with are still at that $10,000 a month, you need to, I don't want to say dump them and move on, but you do need to expand your circle of influence to people who can help you where you are. And hopefully you can help them too in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It only gets more important and more active. It seems like the larger the sellers are.
Hmm.
It's which is kind of counterintuitive a bit. Especially when in the beginning, when I started out, sellers were so protective and you didn't want to, you're afraid you're going to give something away and that's going to be crucial. But if you're doing $1 million a year, over 1,000 ASINs, it's funny how the problems that seem so big in the very beginning, are irrelevant, because the
Hmm.
most important thing becomes finding a peer, that can help you solve the problem, because
Right.
again, think about what's at stake. This is your store. This is 7 figures worth of revenue. Um, yeah, it's funny. The bigger sellers are have stronger connections with other big sellers.
Yeah.
It's kind of this mushroom shape. If you're climbing up in sales,
Yeah.
um, it's interesting.
And the interesting thing is some of these big sellers, they pay big money to be in masterminds with other big sellers,
Right,
thousands
right.
of dollars a year just to make sure they can get in the room with someone who is probably, there's going to be people who are smaller than them, people who are bigger than them, people who are right around the same, but all people who are smart enough or driven enough to get to a certain level.
Hmm.
And this doesn't matter whether you're OA, RA, private label, wholesale, whatever. They're all there. um, all right. So there's a ton of other things we could go down, but we should probably wrap it up there. This is going to be a long episode. Chris, you got the quote of the week this week. I was wondering if you might be able to take this thing home for us.
Yeah. I knew what we were going to talk about and found this one. The quote it's from Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, who wrote a book called "Who Not How," which we've both read. We read it as part of our book club. Um, and the quote is: "Results, not effort, is the name of the game. You're rewarded in life by the results you produce, not the effort and time you put in."
Mm.
Now, this really hit me pretty hard when my Readwise unearthed it. Um, and I thought it fit this because there's a lot of stuff, like you mentioned with the bookkeeping, and you echoed the same thing with account health. Is that you can kind of you can 2 hour and 5 hour and 10 year hour yourself into really capping your potential. And you really need to think about the results that are coming from the activities that you choose, especially as you grow to 1 million. It's
Hmm.
you're not going to be able to keep all those plates spinning. So it's focus on the results. Because we all know the theory that work expands to the time that you allow for it. I can't think of the name of that of the law specifically, but
Parkinson's law.
Parkinson's. Okay, yeah. So uh, you focus more on the result, because we know the people that are like, oh, I've been at this for hours and hours, and it's like being at work and actually being productive at work are unfortunately two different things sometimes. So
Hmm.
I think this a good quote pertaining to this episode.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this week, guys. I hope you got something out of this. Hopefully, we kind of gave you a roadmap to follow. I know it's not a strategic how to but it gives you kind of an overarching view of how things need to change as you grow in this particular business. So hopefully that was helpful. We'll see you guys in the next episode 51, which we'll have out here pretty soon. All right, thanks for listening. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share it to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.